they're too afraid to write their own verse.
Exactly.
Because they're afraid that the way they have to write it is not going to be favorable to them. Hey guys, welcome to the Shade Cinema podcast. I'm Chris, and today we are discussing the Dead Poets Society with my good friend Nishan, who's been on his hiatus from the show since Gladiator.
I'm still alive.
Are you not entertained?
Just to give a brief summary of what the film is about. The film is basically about these kids who go to this school, these boys who go to this all-boy prep school, and they essentially learn how to become components of society, parts of the big wheel that's going to keep society going. And through all of the really boring classes that they have, they get to this one teacher of poetry who teaches them not just about poetry but how to live lives and how and impacts their lives on such a deep personal level. And the movie is actually very cheesy. It stars Robin Williams, so it's cheesy, but in a good way. It's a good cheesy. It's 80s and 90s good cheesy movie.
Satisfactory.
Very, very satisfactory, like you said.
In a way, the movie wouldn't work without the fact that Robin Williams is the teacher, because they say that he's there to replace another poetry teacher.
Yeah.
So technically, the movie is kind of aiming to show what this new teacher has to bring to the table, in a way.
One of the interesting parts of the movie is that I think it has the very famous quote Carpe Diem. Carpe Diem meaning what? Do you know?
It means seize the day.
Seize the day. These boys basically experience Carpe Diem, but in different ways. Just through if you look at their stories, you get the different ways, right? So can you name the five?
Well, we have the five main boys of the club. Well, of the society, in a way.
The Dead Poets Society. The Dead Poets Society, by the way, is the club. Is a club basically of poetry, and there's seven boys, but the five of them are actually actually noteworthy.
And it was originally from the teacher, because the teacher used to attend the school himself, and they created this Dead Poets Society when they were there. The group wasn't looked on favorably by the school administration, and looks like these new boys, this new generation, brings the group back to life.
Exactly.
After one class, literally. We have Neil, Todd, Knox, Charlie, Cameron. These are the five interesting ones that we're gonna touch on, and because they bring, of course, they're kind of the main characters in a way, apart from the teacher Keating and the principal. But yeah, after looking, well, we're gonna see how each and every one of these five kids embraces Carpe Diem and how they enact it in their own way in their lives.
Yeah, so let's start with Neil, who's actually we'll keep Neil for last.
Yeah,
let's start with Todd.
Yes, Todd.
So Todd is the main character. Todd is very shy. He's very introverted. He doesn't like to really get out of his shell. He's someone who has trouble socializing with other people and voicing his beliefs and his disagreements that he has with other people. I think Todd's transformation is one of the most drastic out of the whole show. Could you name any examples?
Well, I would say that he literally starts off as a ghost, and he says it himself. I would, when he's interacting with the rest of the group, he says, I would much rather be there rather than interact. I want to be there with you, listen to you guys, listen to what you have to say, but don't expect me to add much to the conversation. I'll start off being there.
Yeah,
you know?
it's but that's the thing. It's he at least he wants to put in the effort to just start off, but originally he didn't even want to go. If you remember, Neil had to convince him. It's no, it's fine. You can go, but you don't have to necessarily read poetry or anything like that.
Just being there is enough.
Yeah, just be there, and we'll take care of everything else ourselves. And
it also starts off because he is Neil's roommate in a way.
Yeah. So he is Neil's roommate. So yeah. So Neil greatly influences his belief, and although Keating is the thing that is the person that brings. Introduces Carpe Diem to the world of Todd, Todd's world. Neil is the one who really pushes it along, and you see that especially later on in the movie with the tragedy that Neil faces, which we'll talk about later.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have Knox, Knox Overstreet.
Oh,
He's
no.
I wrote next to him Lover Boy because for all those who because there are a lot of like characters in there's a lot of characters in the story, and sometimes my first time watching it personally I was mixed up between like who's who, so I had to literally write those little code names right next to them to associate their behaviors to whoever they are. You know, that's basic stuff. But you know, so Knox is the lover boy. There's Charlie. He's more of a rebel. He's sitting in the back of the class, giving like smirky and smart remarks. You know, smart ass remarks. And there's Cameron, the stiff snitch. We'll stay at it with that because we're gonna develop.
Yeah. So we'll let's talk about these three guys first before we get to Neil. Yeah. So at first we have Knox. Mm-hmm. So Knox, he at first his character was just like, okay, well whatever, like we'll get we'll just be a part of this Dead Poet Society. Him like trying to just embrace, like he's embracing it. But then one day he's invited to like go over to like some like the house of some client his dad has, because his dad's a lawyer. And he goes there, and the girl who opens the door is like the most beautiful girl he's ever seen, and he's like, his jaw is like he's trying to collect it off the floor. Like,
what was her name though? I forgot.
Chris.
Yeah, Chris. It's true. The most beautiful girl he had ever seen in his 16 years of life, or maybe less. Still.
But then he finds out that she's taken, so he goes like,
"Oh my God, bro!
Oh hell no!"
Yeah, he has quite a big mountain to climb, you know.
Yeah,
passionately speaking.
Yeah, he has a. So his whole goal in the movie is to get Chris, right? To get Chris to fall in love with him, and his journey is very interesting as well, because he takes several points. There's several points where he talks about like how he wants Chris and how he wants to like he wants her to be his.
Well, he just wants to be with her. He wants to be able to fall in love with her, but her having the usual football player boyfriend is quite of a big obstacle to tackle, you know. So he's kind of just emotionally stuck and entwined in that little pain you feel inside.
Exactly. So he's trying to wrestle with the fact that this girl has a guy
already, you know.
Yeah. So it's like he's
dealing with hope and hopelessness at the same time.
Yeah. So it's like, but then through the hope and hopelessness, he's seizing the day by like calling her. He called her, right? He did something risky, right? Like, why would he just, like, this random guy just call me, right? So he called her. He's like, Carpe Diem, and he calls her, and then she invites him over to a party at the boyfriend's house. And then a bunch of stuff happens, and eventually he ends up getting the girl, even though it's like unbelievably cringy. It's like the most cheesy ass. It's like, Chris, I love you, but like he hardly even knows this chick, and this chick is like, oh well, okay, you know, like whatever. But like obviously it's not like,
sure, I'll invite you.
Sure. Like it's not the most realistic thing ever, but like at the same time, like the whole point is that like he's pushing ahead, and he's achieving this like greater level of his life. He's achieving this new part of his life, which is basically to become like,
articulate and courageous, I guess, in the love sphere.
Yeah, like he's becoming better at like romance in general and stuff like that.
And it was interesting because after the call, some of the guys with him who were around the call and they heard everything he said, they were kind of doubting, like, did she say yes to go with you, or she just said, yeah, come over? And in his head, it's, yeah, come with me. We're going together to the party. And it's kind of that blind love or blind courage symptoms that he's showing. But in a way, he is evolving, because the Knox, from the beginning of the movie, he was just sitting back in misery, in silence, and he wasn't doing anything. And now he's full of hope. He actually called her. He's doing, and you know, so at least he's taking the first step. So okay, fine. Let him imagine that. At least he changed his attitude a bit.
Exactly. So yeah, it's interesting. That's an interesting point. Is that like he, despite the fact that he wasn't invited to go with her, it's like he still took it as that. Well, it's not that. Well, he still took it as a win, because it's not that she wanted him to go with her, but rather that she thought about him coming to the party.
Yeah, it's true. She did say that I thought of you, and like I was gonna call you to invite you, which I doubt, because
No, I was like, oh no. She's like, oh, I was gonna call you, and then she's like, she was gonna call. She's like, what the fuck?
and that lights the flame even more. You know?
Yeah. So it's like it's not like you called. Okay, well I might as well invite you. It was like, oh, I was gonna call you. Like, oh, do you want to come to this party?
You see, I have a doubt about that. I think she just felt bad in the moment because when she met him at first at the door, they didn't really talk. He was having a seizure while standing up, you know. But I don't think she thought about him. And it just happened that when he called, she just wanted to be nice. Oh yeah, I thought of you.
No, I disagree. I think she, like, in the moment she just thought, I was like, oh, okay, well maybe they had a conversation you just didn't see.
Maybe, yeah, because the movie is focused on other things.
Yeah, so like they just see Chris, and then like we don't see
know
like,
what she's thinking.
Like, and there's also no. Although I've seen the deleted scenes as to who the boyfriend is, like there's no direct like correlation as to who he actually like was. Like how is he important to
her? Not
to her, but to the boys in the school.
Okay. Did he go to the same school as them?
Okay, so apparently he went to the same school, but he got like kicked out or he dropped out.
Okay.
Because he wasn't doing well enough in grades, so he had to go to like a public school.
Okay. Because he's like the typical football jock.
Yeah, so he went to Welton, but then he got kicked out.
Okay.
Because he flunked out, basically.
I see.
So yeah, but as far as Knox goes, he carpe diemed. He basically carpe diem is doing, but like.
Exactly. Very well put.
So he basically did it by getting the girl, right? And then you have Charlie. Charlie is the one who's
the rebel. Yeah,
the rebel. So Charlie, I think he already had those qualities, but it caused him to go from like he brought it up to 11. So he had like the qualities up to like 7-ish. Like he was a rebel-ish, but he wouldn't like overtly act out. And then when Keaton came in and then the whole Dead Poet Society thing happened, he began to lash out. He began to go.
And it
like,
kind of lit
rebel.
the fire in him, but like in an uncontrollable way.
Yeah. So even to the point where he was like...
changing his name to Wanda.
There was a part where he punches Cameron in the face.
Yeah, towards the end.
And then Cameron goes, "You just signed your expulsion papers, no Wanda."
It's true. Actually embracing his new identity for once.
Yeah. And then what was it, like Keating taught them how to like suck the marrow out of life. So you know how you eat like chicken wings?
But it was more the Dead Poets Society that it was written for, sucking the marrow of life.
Yeah. So like
he was telling them mostly to enjoy and to live life, because in his first class, which is one of the best scenes of the movie, like anytime that Keating is on screen, he's just gold.
Yeah, it's amazing.
He says the human race is filled with passion, and he's teaching those boys to be in touch with the passion that they feel inside of them, you know?
Exactly.
And Charlie is a good example of that. He has a lot of he has the challenger instinct in him. He likes to defy authority. Well, at least we see like little hints of it in him in the beginning of the film, but then when they're told about seizing the day and learning about Carpe Diem, it's showed even more, and he expresses it even like more dramatically.
I think a great example is like when we'll talk about it a bit later, but when Neil's dad first comes into the room and he gets basically berated to get out of the whole school paper thing, and then what was his name? And then Charlie and Knox tell him like, "Oh, why don't you just tell him off?" And then he's like, "Well, do you tell off your parents, guys?" And then Charlie's like, "Okay, I don't like it as much as you do." So that means that he doesn't tell off his parents, but he wishes he had the desire to tell his parents off like that.
Exactly.
But he can't, because like if he did, obviously
he would have to get into position. Exactly. Yeah.
So one of the quotes that Keating said after like Charlie got into after the
exactly
near the end of the movie, it was sucking the marrow out of life, which when you eat bone marrow, like you're eating chicken wings and then you cut it and then you suck the thing in the middle.
Yeah, full of protein. They say.
Yeah. So sucking like the marrow out of life doesn't mean choking on the bone.
it's taking life and just stripping everything there is to it and taking it in you, you know?
Yeah. So it's like
living
it's
it to the
in
max.
taking life. Yeah, in taking life to the maximum, to its fullest potential, but that doesn't mean that you should just
choke on it.
Which means like don't just indulge endlessly or don't do anything super stupid or risky or anything like that. I think that's a clear indicative of like what exactly Charlie was doing during the whole show or during the whole movie. Was that like he was taking it a bit too far. He was taking it far too seriously and seriously too far, right?
Literally.
So like for example, like when they published an article on the name of the Dead Poets Society, he published it without telling everyone else, and then everyone else was like pissed off at him. It's like, why did you do that?
You
like,
don't speak for us.
You
know?
don't speak for us.
And it kind of got him not in the crosshairs, but it did. It did give a bad image to the group to start with.
Well, no, like in general, like it immediately just sparked outrage because what was the article about? To let girls into hell.
Oh yeah. God is calling. He's asking to let girls in.
Mr. Nolan, it's God.
Please let girls in.
He's telling you that girls should be inducted into Welton.
And that's when you see conformity.
Yeah, exactly. So the next one we're going to talk about is Cameron. Perfectly segue enough. Which is conformity. So Cameron is the one guy who's very kind of strict. Not strict, but like he's stiff. He doesn't adapt to the situation very well. And he has trouble like... Embracing a rebellious side. Right, he's very much a person who is full of order. You know how like the world is created out of there's chaos and order, right? And has to be like a happy balance.
He did have the courage though to try and look the other side of the border, but he came back pretty fast.
Well, to be honest, he only really did that because he saw all of his friends doing it. So he didn't seize the day because he wanted to seize the day, but because his friends were seizing the day and he didn't want to be left out.
In a way,
yeah. But then when the time came to save his own skin at the end, he switched immediately. He's like, like you have to. I was like, you can't save Keating, but you can save yourselves. But like, I understand that but at the same time, it's like you're betraying your own word or you're betraying the vow that you took to be a part of the Dead Poet Society.
What did that mean to you? You know,
exactly.
You took it like just like that to jump on the bandwagon, or were you really interested? And those who watch the movie know that he just did it to jump on the bandwagon and just to be rebellious for a bit and not take it seriously.
Yeah. So when the heat got too hot, when the kitchen got too hot, he left, and it ended up costing what was his name? Charlie his school like him. He got kicked out because he punched him.
He did give him a nice little like we should have seen Rogan's commentary team go. Well, if I recall the scene, Cameron did fucking fly into
he
some
flew
books
back.
and
And he was bleeding from the nose.
Yeah, well deserved.
Yeah,
piece of shit.
Yeah, he's a piece of shit. So and you can even see the way like Cameron was even taking notes in the first scene, which was understanding poetry. Like he was talking about how he was taking notes and he was dividing everything up in the proper way. Like, oh well, you have to classify it by like how well it's written or like the importance of what it means. Like the graph, right?
Yeah, the graph to explain how poetry is the power and the potential of poetry. So the longer it goes and the higher the meaning of the words, that creates the field of
a great poem.
Exactly.
But then what was it? What was the description that Keating gave for?
For
that definition of poetry?
I don't remember exactly word per word what he said, but what I think is the reason why he told him to rip the pages off is because you can't put a mathematical, explanation to something that is so wild and like traceable. The emotions go each way, and you can't put a graph on that.
Yeah. So the word he used, I think, was excrement, which means shit.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I think he said like it's shit, like you said, you can't put a meaning on something that's like artistic. Like you can't put like you can't put a grade of how important something is on something that's artistic, because art is almost entirely subjective. There's no such thing as well, I mean, you could say there is such thing as bad art. Like I've heard of a story where someone sold an invisible statue for like $30,000 or something.
Air. I'm selling you air.
Exactly. So
Only. What was it? The OnlyFans fart girl. Nasty.
So I think when it comes to the impact that Keating had, it wasn't for them to think in like a rigid inside of the box kind of thinking, but think outside of the box. Remember the scene where they're in the courtyard and they're walking, and then they're all walking like different paces at first, but then over time they begin to catch up to each other, and then like they walk at the same pace,
and everyone around starts to clap because they feel the rhythm and the tempo building up, and etc.
Exactly. So I think, and that's a great scene about conformity and conforming to like the way society kind of wants you to be. What is even like the four mottos of the school, right?
Honor.
It was
discipline, tradition, and I forgot the fourth one.
It was tradition, honor, discipline, excellence.
Excellence. What did they try to mean by excellence? And excellence as in you being
a good student. Good student.
Good student. Okay.
So it's like a tradition is to maintain the tradition, as like you can see they pray and all that stuff before eating.
Been there. Been there.
Honor in terms of like, you know, telling the truth or whatever. Discipline in terms of like, you being able to study, and then excellence in terms of like to excel is basically to be better than the usual, than the average, right? So the thing is, those four by themselves are fine. It's just the problem is that when you think only of those four things, you begin to like lose the meaning of living a life. If you don't live a life properly, and if you don't live the life to its fullest potential by enjoying the moments that you have, even the moments not you just getting plastered with your friends at a bar, but like just appreciating the fact that the sun's out on a day and it's beautiful. The weather is just really nice, despite the fact that it's November, it's pissing rain right now,
and freaking dark at 5 a.m.
No, it's not
5 p.m. too.
Well, it's December now, but like like it's pissing. It's like dark out by like you said, by 5 p.m. But appreciating the small little things and like enjoying life to its absolute fullest potential. That is extreme. That's the important part of what this movie is about. It's like to enjoy life to its fullest extremes, and also to break the ideals of conformity, which is what you were talking about earlier. And I think the problem is that the reason why a lot of people are conforming or comfortable, and just for those who don't know the definition, I wrote it down, or the one that they said in the movie, which is the difficulty of maintaining your own beliefs in the face of others.
But also, conformity is mostly like your beliefs aligning with themselves with the beliefs of the common group, you know, of the masses.
That's kind of like
alienation,
like that. I just call that programming.
Literally,
it's that's what it is. But like, I mean, like the difficulty of maintaining your own beliefs. And so, as in, like, you believe in one thing, right? Like, let's say you believe in A, but me and like 30 other people believe in B. You're much more pressured to believe in B than you are to believe in A, because you see the pressure of everyone else around you saying, like, no, this is the right way to believe. This is the right way to think. I don't know if you've been in those situations before.
Well, it has happened to everyone, you know, where you're having debates with friends or family, you know, you bring up a topic and you end up giving your opinion, and sometimes your opinion might do someone good, you know. It's like someone might take it well, and the opposite is very possible. Someone might reject it completely and even try to pull you into believing and accepting what they say. You know, they're saying they try to bring you into their idea and say that this is right and you should believe it in it also.
Yeah.
But the whole point of the movie, the whole point of today's episode, is to see how some of these students which ones fell to conformity and which ones resisted it.
Yeah. So there's the great part about it, like, and that can go perfectly into the next character that we can talk about, which is Neil. So Neil, the interesting part about him is that he really, really wants to break out. He really wants to break the conformity of the boring life that his parents basically have already set up for him.
And you bring an interesting point. I don't want to stray too far, but I was wondering, when watching the movie, how many of these boys are there by their own free will, and what is the percentage of these boys being, okay, I want to become a good doctor, and I know this is the place that would help me get there, and how many of those kids is it where their parents forced them, you're going to become this, you're going to become that, and this is the way to do it, and you're going to this school, you have nothing to say, shut the fuck up and go to school. What's the percentage? And I'm sure that, like, we don't tackle this in the movie, really. The movie doesn't show us, but the opposite is shown. Like, when I'm meaning the opposite is like those that are forced into this life, and Neil is the perfect example. His father literally says, okay, he is dictating his life, and like you said earlier in the beginning of the story, when Neil actually just meets Todd into their dormitories, and his father comes and says, you have to drop journalism because you've got too many other stuff going on at the same time. So that's the perfect example of how the parents are dictating and controlling these kids' life.
Exactly. I guess a question I can ask for that is, like, should the kids be able to choose what they do with their own lives?
Well, of course they should, but again, like, what is the circumstances around them? Like, do you have very controlling and oppressive parents? Do you have very open-minded parents? Now that is like that's less of a problem today, I guess. Well, it depends in which countries, of course, but in a way it is a bit lighter. But back then, the movie is set in the 50s. Back then, it's post-war. It's the post-war mentality. People need to go work. It's very drill sergeant like. Did you see how each kid says yes sir to their parents, or at least Neil in this case? Neil is a very yes sir, I will, okay, yes sir, and that shows the oppressive side a bit of the parents. Well, some might say, okay, the parents are doing for the good of the kid, but there was one moment the dad said, we're not that rich, and then that's Neil's dad saying, we're not that rich. But when you come to think about it, I mean, you see their house. They have a pretty good house, a good-looking house. They don't live in a dump. They are sending their kids to a high-end school. I mean, you're doing okay. You don't need him to be a fucking brain surgeon to survive.
You know what's interesting is that I wrote a bunch of this stuff down. Like, his dad basically controls him, and he has like he controls every aspect of his life. Even when Neil he wants to like go off and become an actor, he doesn't allow him. Initially, he's like, how dare you become an actor? Or I think it was maybe more pissed off over the fact that like his son went like behind his back to become an actor, and the issue that I had with him, with his father, was that his father just didn't like try to appreciate like the little things about what Neil is trying to do. He's trying to not only become a doctor, but he's trying to explore like acting. But what Neil's father, my guess is, he's afraid that
it might drag him into it.
He might drag him into acting instead of becoming a doctor, and he's like, he doesn't want his son to just be like, he wants his son to have like a dignified, good life, a good work, a good straightforward job. Well, not straightforward, but like he wants to have a good job, like with medical school and all that stuff. And instead of allowing his son to explore small things, like it's just acting, it's just one play. It's just one play, and maybe he goes to 2 or 3 more, but like his grades are amazing, like it's fine. Like why would he care? But his father just wanted to control everything. And the problem with that is that like Neil is playing the part of the dutiful son. That's like in the scene where Keating says that.
It wakes him up.
It wakes him up, and he becomes kind of like, okay, well, I have to do this. 'Cause
You
he's
already
not-
are an actor.
like he's already acting, but just for his father instead of like
His passion,
in front of a play. One of the things I wrote is like he feels like he said something like he says like I feel trapped, and I said, well, he feels, and I elaborated on that. He said I think he feels trapped between his overbearing father and then like his desire to act.
Exactly.
So his father is
It's
like
holding him back.
is restricting him, but his desire to act is like trying to inspire him to become greater.
And not
His
only his
father-
desire for acting, but Keating himself lit that fire in him.
Yeah.
You know, seize the day.
So,
back to,
like a Carpe Diem, right? So yeah,
and again, there was that another. It's not only Carpe Diem that I think woke these kids up, and it was one of the cringiest. Not cringiest. I'm being mean, but like it was one of the weirdest scenes of the movie. It's when it's their first class. He doesn't say a word, and he just walks out. He says, "Are you coming?" And he takes them to go see pictures of all the other students that were there before them. And they say, "Look at their eyes. Look at them. These are just like you. These people are you." And did they seize the day? Didn't they? You know, they are dead now. They're just they're meat for the worms now.
yeah, like
So,
they're food for worms.
look at them looking at you, and they're telling you, "Carpe diem, seize the day."
Seize the day.
And I think that also made them realize, okay, I'm human. I won't be here forever. I've got to do what I got to do. I got to try what I got to try.
Yeah, it's a very powerful. That message is very powerful. That like the message of you have to seize the opportunities like whenever possible, because you won't be here forever, and if you don't seize the opportunities now, you're never going to be able to seize them later on eventually.
And Neil is the biggest example out of the 5 guys that we named. He there's Knox with the love story, but Neil's is a bit more.
Well, Neil's story ends tragically because he wasn't able to seize the day. He wasn't like he tried, but he wasn't allowed to, and that caused him to kind of go through like an existential crisis.
And he did seize the day. It's just that it cost him everything.
Yes,
Because of his
you can argue,
dickhead of a parent.
Yeah. His father is inconsiderate of his son's desires, and seeks to only fuel his own personal desires. So his father's desire is for Neil. Not why does he want Neil to become a doctor? Because if Neil becomes a doctor, then he can live a good life. Like he can be retired or whatever, and he can have
everything that he wants in life.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's like he wants his family to be wealthy in the future, right? He's trying to set up Neil so that the whole family becomes wealthy, so the whole family makes money. But like, isn't that like a selfish motive in a way? Like you're controlling your whole son's life just so that
he brings in bread.
So like he can make bread and make money. Like, so for you, like is that really a kind of life that you want your son to live? Shouldn't he live by his own means and fill his own shoes?
Well, if I were Neil's father in this case, because I can't talk if I have a son yet, and I don't know what kind of son he is. Is he delinquent? I won't know. I don't know yet. But
well, he doesn't seem like a delinquent at all.
Like exactly. If Neil was my son, looking at his grades, he's doing very good. He's a smart kid. He has a lot of passion, and he just aced this play that I didn't even want him to go in, let's say. After the play, maybe I personally would have changed my idea. Let's say that I was strict and I didn't want him to go to the play because, okay, he's going to be distracted from his school. But after the play, I see that he nailed it, he's good at it. I would push him to not only do that, that's your backup, your backup is medicine and med school,
Yeah.
But like, okay, you can do something with acting. And acting wasn't as lucrative as it is today, because today, your son says, I want to become an actor. There is a chance he makes as much money as a doctor. You never know.
Well, yeah, nowadays, yeah, but like back then
In the 50s, it wasn't nothing. It's theater, you get nothing. And at that age, it's cheap labor, But as a parent, I would say, okay, fine. If that makes you happy, do it. As long as you have your head on your shoulders and you're not fucking up with your school.
You just say like you have to give conditions though. In my opinion, you would have to give conditions. It's like,
of course.
You're only allowed to do it if you get straight A's.
Yeah, exactly. That's the keeping your head on your shoulders, doing good in school. And since he's already good in school, okay, fine. Just keep it balanced.
Yeah, keep it balanced. But then he didn't do that. Instead, he just completely restricted his son's
and even made it
abilities.
worse for him. He said, "You're going to a
Mil-
10-year military school, med school version of a military version of the med school."
They were gonna send him to a military school, and
Mhm.
basically that would have been like 10 more years until he was able to
Practice and be free,
be
yeah.
free of the medicine, right? Because then that means he would have to restarted basically the whole process of going to school and then learning about medicine and then learning about that and then getting the ability to practice and whatever and becoming a doctor. And remember the part where he's in his room at his parents' house, and he opens the window and he kind of just stands there.
Yeah.
I look at that scene and I think like Neil at that point, because he wasn't allowed to feel, basically.
It's a cold winter night. Plus,
It's a cold winter.
chest.
It's a cold winter night, and he wanted to earlier talk about how he felt to his father about acting,
and then he
but
couldn't get it out.
He couldn't get it out of fear, right? He didn't seize the day in that sense.
Was he ashamed of that? Maybe. I don't think that caused his suicide, but it was a little factor. I think he should have expressed his emotions no matter what, because this was a life and death situation in a way, because you were going to get stripped 10 years of your life.
Yeah, but I don't think it was what.
He should have seized the day, as in he should have expressed his emotions towards acting and about acting.
I don't think it was his inability to not do that. It was more of the fact that he wasn't allowed to do
of course.
what he wanted.
That was like
to do.
a big percentage of why he.
Of course, but
he took himself out.
I think he took himself out because he just wasn't allowed to feel. Basically, he was just being like a vessel for his father, right? So his father would have
extension even
like he was just like a vessel for his father's desires and his father's wills.
And it's sad because he was. Like, of course, it's sad he took himself out, but he was sad because out of all the boys, he was the one that was most enlightened by what Keating had to say. Exactly. I remember the scene, and this is my favorite quote of the movie, and I'm sure everyone loves this quote. It says, "The powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse." And that I was watching when I heard that for the first time, I had my eyes as big as Neil's. Neil's is just sitting there, taking that in, and then Keating repeats it again. He says, "The powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse do?" It's so powerful, and you see his eyes brighten up, and to see his light,
because his idea is like he wants to put a dent into the universe, and I think that's just the desire for anyone who's young.
Exactly,
because they haven't had the dreams beaten out of them fully just yet. They still have a little bit of it left.
You got to open the hearts of the youth before they're too old. That's what I wrote down. When they're too old, they're stuck in patterns. You can't break patterns when you're 50. And it is possible, but it's hard.
What was it? You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Exactly.
And also keep in mind that's such a great thing you just said that, because if you think about it, the people who learn languages the best are young kids. Like they're like 5 years old.
They can learn anything.
Like there was like this one kid who's like 7, when like she knows like 7 or 8 languages or something like that. 1 per year. Basically, like she's able to learn all of that because like just when you're a kid, your brain is so malleable.
It's like a sponge. It takes everything.
Literally. So it's like at that point in time, it's the best time to teach them, and he taught them about like this is the best way we could be portraying ourselves for the rest of our lives. So I was gonna say something about the window. So he opens the window, right, and he lets the cold air in. He's not wearing a jacket or anything, and the reason why is because he wasn't allowed to feel before. He's trying to just feel the cold weather. Because if he wasn't even allowed to feel in front of his father, so he's just trying to like feel the cold, right? Just feel the weather and the cold. To live a life without being able to feel can make anyone go crazy. Exactly. And it was either he was gonna go crazy, he was gonna be dead inside, or he was gonna be literally dead. So,
but the circumstances too are very extreme, because this happens right after his standing ovation, and it was like an amazing feeling. He felt the appreciation and the success of his desire of acting. He at first he was super sure of it, and he remained true to his ambition. And when he got the standing ovation, that was the climax of that thought. Maybe I could be an actor, and it worked out. And from going to that high to such a low that fast just broke him. And the blow being, you're gonna get 10 more years of this.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so true.
He went down so fast in the span of 1 hour.
He crashed hard.
And that's why opening the window even like usually you open your window in Canada right now in chest, you're gonna freeze your tits off, and he did it in a way to just feel something, because he was so low in the mud, and you just can't get yourself out of there.
Absolutely. So there was actually, here's something that Todd said after he found out that Neil died.
His father did it.
Yeah, his father did it. What do you think about that?
I would have thought the same thing, literally, because you saw, again, in the beginning of the movie, the thought dad comes in, you're going to drop journalism, that, and Todd was privy to that. He was right next to the room.
Yeah.
He heard it, and he knew how Neil had to bypass his father to get an audition in the play. So he kept on reminding Neil, you sure about your dad? Your dad's gonna whack you. You have to get into position, and and so Todd was very aware of the fact that Neil had strict parents. But in a way, I would have thought the same. Of course, no sane dad can kill their own son, but via your decisions, look what happens.
Yeah. So do you think like his decisions directly caused his father?
Directly murdered him.
But then it's interesting how they try to pin that on Keating. But wouldn't you say that Keating kind of bears some form of responsibility?
Zero. I would not blame anyone that opens the hearts of people who are literally encaged.
What do you mean by that?
No, because Keating literally opened their eyes, again, opening the hearts of the youth before they're too old. They could have been amazing doctors. They could have been amazing surgeons and lawyers, just because he taught them to think differently. He told them to look at the world, do what you like. Of course, you're going to pass this poetry class and continue on being whatever you want to be. But with this new insight, you would have been even better than the ones around you, because everyone was, like the horses without the... I forgot what it's called, but you can't look
hindsight.
sideways. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no, hindsight, peripheral vision.
Yeah,
tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision. You're very locked into your mission, but he was going to become a doctor, and maybe this new way of seeing things, like standing up on a table, and okay, then he would have stood up on the table to look at his patients, but the way to think differently might have made him a better doctor. He might have interacted with his patients better, or same thing with the other kids who
maybe he didn't need to use drugs.
What is drugs?
He would just smack them and say, you're good. Maybe the future lawyer might have been a better lawyer. Instead of being a cheap ass lazy lawyer, he would have been a more devoted lawyer. So I don't blame Keating at all, because you need people like that. And again, coming back to the thing, the powerful play goes on and you may contribute or verse. I think a lot of kids these days need to hear that, because a lot of them are just stuck in old patterns. They just don't know where they are, and they some of them don't even know how to feel. So I think they need to be told to look, you're alive, you're part of the game, and your moves have an impact. You're not an ant. An ant will live, but his actions will not live on through eternity or echo in eternity. Yours can. That's the importance and the power of your presence here, right now. A lot of people need to hear that.
You ever watch The Never-Ending Story?
No, I do not know.
Well, basically it's a story that never ends, right?
Ooh.
And that's kind of like what reality is.
It's just a timeline.
Yeah, just a timeline, right? And the idea that Keating is trying to instill in these boys is that, like, what will you contribute to improve to the never-ending story? What will you contribute to the tale? What verse will you have? What will be your story? If you look at like all the the very important, famous people in history, right? Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Spartacus.
Yes.
Give me what I want!
We need to do an episode on that. Oh, whatever.
Give me what I want!
Give it to me.
Fuck you, bitch.
You look at like we said, Spartacus. We look at Napoleon Bonaparte. Like, these are important people, not necessarily good people, but they're important people who played their important verse into the story.
They had their damn own orchestras.
bro, like Napoleon, let's say, like, there's a series of wars named after him, the Napoleonic Wars. There's
exactly.
like I don't know how many of them there are,
Countless.
like 4 or 5, but like there's a series of wars named after him. Isn't that like, wouldn't that be like a great thing? I guess it kind of goes back to when we were talking about Gladiator.
Are you not entertained?
Like when we talked about
Love or Legacy,
and it's kind of like he's telling them not only to have like love, like the love of, the people around you, but to fulfill a legacy that will impact not only your lives, but like to like impact the lives of others in a good positive way, which is what Neil wanted to do. He wanted to like impact people's lives by being a part of a good play, or Knox wanted to impact the life of Chris by dropping
Baby girl.
impacting.
he wanted to
do it. And speaking of impacting lives, we need to talk about the principal. The principal, Nolan, that little jerk-ass piece of shit that tells you to sit down when you're standing on your desk, and that puts you into position when you're being a bad boy. Ugh. How many did he get? 5?
20.
20?
Oh, I don't know how many.
Fuck.
He
That's a
counted up to 5.
BDSM video right there. Still, I wanted to get to the point where I wrote here, kids are often told not to question, kids are often told not to question, and in this film it is more than present, because you question authority and it's like the red button, you're ejected. Ciao, bye. And
look,
it's contradictory to actual learning. Okay, in class you ask a question, how does this work, and this and that, but now when the kids were actually questioning and saying, like especially Todd, he was questioning and saying, Keating had nothing to do with this. This is not his fault.
Yeah.
And
then like he cuts him down, right?
And says, okay, you keep defending Keating and you're out.
Yeah.
And even it's sad to see that his parents were siding with the principal. You're like, shut the fuck up, kid, and you say sign the paper.
But there's clearly, like, his parents don't give a fuck about him. His his shy and insecure nature has to do with the fact that his parents they
bought him twice the same desk set.
They bought him the same desk set. They bought him the same desk set twice, and then like he basically like. He's just like, fuck it, and he just threw one. Like,
very aerodynamic.
Very aerodynamic thing. So his shy nature, I think, has to do with the fact that his parents just don't fucking love him enough.
Exactly.
So, because I think kids who are usually very shy typically are kids who don't feel loved by their parents enough, right? So, like, what was the scene? There was a scene where Keating, the famous yop scene, right? Scene.
Yeah.
That's yop, by the way. Like, so the yop scene is basically in the movie where Keating teaches Todd to
yop
to let out his inner barbarian, right? I think everyone has that in him, right? We were talking about order and chaos, right? The order part of humans is like the sophisticated part of humans that think like the new part of our brain, right? The new part of our brain that's all about order. While the chaos is all about like the old part of our brain, the very
primitive,
the primitive barbarian part. And the whole point of the yop is to
let it out.
To let it out, right? He says, like, the quote that he uses from a poet was, "I shout my barbaric yop from the rooftops of the world." Basically, it's to declare himself like, this is me, like this is the purest form of myself. And he basically goes Todd into like unleashing this this inner barbarian in him, and that allows him to that allows Todd to really express himself in a way that he's never expressed himself, and then he closes his eyes and they spin around.
Get into that, because
they spin around. So let me just finish this. They spin around together, and then he finally is able to express himself in a way that he wanted to express. It's like he described what was it?
The blanket.
He described the truth as a blanket that can't cover your feet. Like you try to
kick at it and
kick at it, like scream at it. It will never be enough. And like he basically he says that he believes that his truth, or I don't necessarily believe in that, but like the truth is not enough for him to feel satisfied. So he's not happy with himself, and what Keating allowed him to do is like to see in front of him, and like to really be able to express that truth and maybe find a better truth that he can latch onto.
Exactly. And I think the best tool that Keating gave them, apart from the obvious, the seize the day, it was the yop. Because the yop, like you said, is letting out your inner barbaric that challenges the order. And the yop, in a way, can be seen as a tool to fight back conformity. And I wanted, like, when you started talking about closing the eyes, spinning around, and Todd improvises his first poem, I really love the blanket analogy. He says that old man, because it was about an old man.
Yeah, he was like crazy old man.
Exactly, the crazy old man.
A madman. What kind of madman? A crazy madman.
He smells of shit. Oh, there's a poet in you, son. And he says,
What is drugs?
The madman is holding on to him, strangling him, and that eventually feels like a blanket that never covers you, keeps you cold, and no matter how hard you fight against it, it just stays onto you until you die, until the end. And that blanket, I think, is conformity. It's how society throws that blanket on us.
And it's never enough.
It's stuck on us. And the yop is a tool to pierce the blanket.
Yoga, fire!
No,
you know what I mean. Like, the yop is the tool to fight back with it. Your inner barbaric should be used to challenge whenever you feel covered.
Exactly.
With conformity.
It's good, man.
The blanket is just
fire.
It's just how they want to not control you, but limit you in a way. This will keep you warm. This blanket, this mentally philosophical blanket, will keep you warm and safe, knowing that you are within the group, you are within the parameters of the blanket. But in reality, when you try to remove the blanket, it's just stuck on you, and society is keeping it on you. So the yop pierces it through, when one punch. Hadouken! That went very philosophical.
Yeah, that's great, man. So I'm gonna ask you 2 questions, okay?
Shoot.
How does society fuel conformity?
When are we talking about?
In
In
general?
I don't want to say with the present laws, but the laws do affect in a way. But laws are, I'll be very old school about this. Laws are there for a certain reason, of course, to keep law and order and keep good. Well, depending again of which sphere we're talking about. But conformity in itself, I think, comes from what is good and bad, Like, what society says is good and what society says is bad or weird or unacceptable.
So, like, what is... So they try to enforce what's good and try to negatively impact what is bad. So, like, they try to, like, say people, okay, don't do this because it's bad, right? So obviously I think a certain level of conformity is important,
of course, because that's what keeps us ourselves in a way.
Well, that's what keeps us alive, because
exactly.
Like if there wasn't any form of conformity, what you would get was you just get people who just end up killing each other for
chaos
for the sake of it, right? Like
order is good, but it shouldn't be a straight line.
It's kind of like a yin and yang.
Yeah.
Right, you need a certain amount of order, but you also need a certain amount of chaos, right?
A certain amount of crazy in you. You gotta let it out a bit.
But the chaos is what was it? I wrote it here. Art is the reason to live. We read and write poetry because we are part of the human race.
Mm-hmm.
poetry is not bricklaying, it's art. So what is bricklaying? Bricklaying is order.
Very ordered and sophisticated.
It's ordered, it's sophisticated, it's not very sophisticated, but like it's ordered, it's built for a reason. The reason for it to exist is just so to protect us,
and
or
very
like
generic.
It's basic, right? It's,
Yeah.
like generally speaking. But art is much more than that. Art is about living the life that you want to live. Art is about
being in touch
being in touch with yourself and being able to express yourself in whichever way you want to express it. It's difficult to try to express yourself in that way if the whole time you're just, like you're always focused on the order of things happening. Art is not something that you can force. I'm sure you're a bit of an artist yourself, right? I'm a bit of an artist myself, right? Like it's difficult to force creativity.
It just happens.
It just kind of happens. But at the same time, I think sometimes it's better to sit down and just like write it out. Like just let's say you're a writer, right?
Exactly. Like you're saying, you gotta have a bit of order in your disorder or your disorganization, because let's like filmmaking, okay?
The order and disorder is good. Yeah.
Like you want to write a movie, you have this strong emotion, you have this scene in mind, you know that, like, I don't have an idea right now, but an example, but you have that emotion. Now you got to be able to put that emotion in paper in order to make sense, for it to make sense on the screenplay. So you take the abstract and the wild and the chaos, and you try to pass it through these filters of conformity in a way, so that it's understandable for others. Because if you just spit out an emotion on screen, some might get it, but the majority that are conforming to their normal ways of understanding won't get it.
Exactly. So I think that kind of plays into the idea of how should you phrase certain things? How should you say these certain things? And just how like I think the way Keating said the way he was saying his things, a bunch of the class got it. Like I would say the majority of the people in the class got it, but some people just didn't care. They just went in for the class, whatever. But his goal was not to impact everyone, was to impact the people who really wanted to be impacted.
And speaking of, not everyone got into it, and it's normal because of course you can't have everyone on your side. And it was interesting to see in the final scene Captain, my captain, standing up on the desk. The guy who did he wasn't part of the group, the clique. He did a very simple poem.
The cat.
The cat was sleeping on.
The cat sat on the mat or something.
Exactly.
Like that
guy actually stood up at the end.
But I think, but would you say that has to do? I think honestly, the majority of them, a bunch of them, did it just to be conformists.
But they were gonna get kicked out. The principal was there. Nolan was there. He's shouting, "Get the fuck down, mate!"
Yeah, but
you're gonna have to get into position.
But you look
recurring, man. He's gonna whack all of them, man. But but that guy stood up. He didn't owe anything to Keating, but I think there's a part of him. Because Keating said something.
It was like what was it?
He told him after his poem. He said something. I forgot.
Don't let your poems be ordinary.
Yeah, he said that.
Sometimes he's like, it's not that your poem is not good because it's short. Sometimes some of the best poems are very short, but or very simple, about a cat or a mat.
Exactly.
But just don't let your poems be ordinary, right? So he didn't want to be ordinary.
So in a way, that reached that student.
Yeah, like that reached him because maybe nobody has ever spoken to him like that. But also, it's interesting that, like, I think I just came up with that point earlier that I said which was that I think that a bunch of them just
did it to be with the group.
Yeah, like they were just conformists from the start. Like they didn't want to become. Like they didn't want to necessarily be a part of it, but like they saw that everyone else was doing it, so I was like, oh well, let me join in, right? Like there's a lot of bandwagoners, but then like if they put any form of like pressure on the teacher, then or pressure on them, like then they would be like, okay, well they would back off. Like they're not hardcore.
But the main guys did stand up, and then that one extra one, he's like, okay, I owe this teacher a little something.
Well, the main guys stood up in like half the other class. But the other half, like...
The snitch, Cameron didn't. That little bastard.
Hadouken!
Yeah, but... Soda! I wanted to get to Cameron, because he's one of the guys who's fully wrapped in the blanket,
Yeah.
And he likes it.
So
he embraces the blanket.
Well, he embraces the blanket, I think, because he's not the most creative person. Like, he's not someone who would benefit greatly out of a situation where he would be able to have like the ability to seize the day. Like, his idea of seizing the day is just doing well at school.
Exactly. Waking up.
Like, he's distinctly unoriginal. The only thing that's original about him is that he's a ginger, and like there's not too many gingers, right? But I think that kind of plays into this next question very well.
Well, I was gonna rebound the question. What do you think about the question you just asked me?
How does society fuel conformity?
Yeah. What means does it use? Do you think?
Well, it uses a lot of like social media. It uses.
But this is modern social media.
Yeah, but
we're talking
just the media as a whole, and the way
the public space,
and the way movies are made, like it's an important way. Like the conformity built from there. It's like, but that takes many years. It's more programming, and the whole like cancel culture stuff, where people get canceled over some statements they made 10 years ago. It's just a way to conform, to make people conform and to fall in line into a belief, into a certain type of belief.
The politically correct attitude.
The politically correct attitude of the time.
Exactly, of the time. That is very important.
Because if you look at it in the movie, it's a highly conservative. It's highly conservative in terms of the programming. But if you look at it now, it's much more left leaning. But I don't want to get like political.
Bruh.
So
I think you did there, mate.
so like I think the way they would do it would be like through movies, would be through the news, like it would be through TV shows, would be through TV as a whole, like the sports that you play, right? They're all like very political now. There's like a million different ways. Like even the school system, you can look at it.
Dude,
like the
universities are shite. My bad, Concordia.
We'll talk about schools.
When you asked me the question, that's what I wanted to answer. Films, social media, TV shows, schools. But I wanted to exclude one. Books. Because books like Potter, but books are very...
Potter?
How can I say? You can't just shove a book in someone's face. The person has to be interested in what they're going to read, unless it's for a freaking university class that we're going to get into right after.
Yeah.
But a movie and something, it's like something that you go see voluntarily. There's no effort into it, and the messages just slide by,
We'll talk about the conformity of school, but first I want to ask you, why don't people seize the day?
Because they think too much. I saw a video about this, legit 1 hour before coming here. It's a financial motivation video. The guy was saying, why not take the risk? Because they keep looking at the risk of, oh my God, if this happens, it will be bad. And even if this happens, then I would be in real shit. But they don't consider the risk of, what if I don't do it?
They don't weigh the pros and the cons.
Exactly.
They just think, okay, well, if I do it, then
do it.
If I do it, then it will come to a problem. But if I don't
Do it. Like a panther.
then I won't be able to reap the benefits of,
or it might even cost me more than I think. I think people aren't seizing the day because they're taking everything for granted in a way.
Okay.
Like they know tomorrow is for certain, and they don't want to risk tomorrow. But they need to understand, just like in the video, life, the moment you were born, you started risking it. Every step that you take is a risk. Every door that you open is a risk. Every book, whatever, anything you do is a risk in this godforsaken world. But I think that's why they're not seizing the day. They just think at the risk, and they don't understand the meaning of what their verse can be, or the impact that their verse can have in this play.
They're too afraid to write their own verse.
Exactly.
Because they're afraid that the way they have to write it is not going to be favorable to them.
And not only the risk of failure, but the risk of criticism, because they might be out of conformity. out of the blanket, and you know how hot the blanket can be. You know?
Oh, the blanket's nice and warm, and it's perfectly
But it can
heated.
be, but when under the wrong physical circumstances, the blanket might be torturously hot. You know,
Exactly. So like on a hot summer's day, it's torturously hot. So you have to,
fight back.
Yeah.
Use your yop.
you have to.
You know, so I think that's why mostly people don't seize the days, just because they choke, because they don't understand the opportunity that they have. The poor guy that died 4 years ago, he wants to he would have done what you're debating right now, but you are just too stuck up in your own head to try. My bad, but sometimes that's what it is, or you're just fucking lazy.
Well, a lot of people.
What do you think?
I think it has to, like, I think it's like you said, fear. Like you pretty much covered it, but it's fear. They're afraid to take the risk, because if they take the risk, then it might reap negative benefits, negative rewards to their lives. It's also laziness, like you said. Like they could,
But I'd rather not.
Yeah, you could, work on this business and maybe turn it into a multi-million-dollar business, or you could go on your couch and just scroll on your phone for about 30 minutes
And
while
listen
watching
to inspirational quotes.
Yeah,
you know?
listen to
It's
inspirational
so
quotes.
ironic, bro. It's become so not toxic, but like ironic, just to the core. You're sitting on your ass on the couch looking inspirational quotes. Man, this was so inspirational.
And then you scroll the next
Next one.
And then the next one is like a video of like whoever, like iShowSpeed playing a video game.
No guy.
No hate to Speed. He's just like,
No, he's funny.
No,
He's fucking hilarious.
He's funny, but this, his shorts, just like the shorts of everyone else, I wouldn't say contributes necessarily to the problem. I think the inspirational quotes are great. I'd rather them all be filled with inspirational quotes, but it kind of makes you feel as though like you're in the moment and you think, okay, well, it's like I'm working, like I'm already there. I'm already like working, like, oh, I'm working. I'm watching these inspirational quotes. It's kind of whack.
But watching these inspirational quotes while taking a dump in the bathroom isn't gonna change shit, you know? Maybe you might take your shit faster, but that's pretty much it. You need to you need to stand up and do something about it, you know? Let's be honest, everyone's scrolling while they're taking a dump, and
there's a chance that the people who are watching this, especially on their phones, probably already scrolled down and like looked at the other videos. Maybe they clicked on it. Maybe
they subscribed,
or maybe they
do it.
like the video,
Ballsy.
subscribe to the channel. So I think one of the things I wanted to touch upon was like when all the kids kind of stood up and they were standing on the desks. They were standing up. It was kind of like a revolution, right? So the first, like, what was it? When Todd went up, it's like
you see in their face there.
Nolan has the power, still has more power, but like as more people started to come up, like the power of the people who were revolting was going up, while the power of the
emperor
of the government, I guess, or the governing power is going down.
Give yourself a check for that. That's very good, because it's the revolution mentality. You know, once the snowball starts, then good luck stopping it. You know.
Yeah. So what is a revolution? A revolution is basically a bunch of people standing in one place and saying no. Like, no, this is not good. This is not okay. So when it comes to the Dead Poet Society movie, it's them standing up and saying, no, we stand up for Mr. Keating. We don't agree that Mr. Keating did anything wrong. And then they stand up and they say, oh, Captain, my Captain, which I love that.
It's funny because I hadn't watched the movie before I watched it before the show, but I hadn't watched it before, and I've watched it only once, and literally when I saw the title Dead Poets Society, in my head it was going to be about poetry. And it's crazy how a film like this can just give you a nice reality check slap in the face. And it, like I said, it opened my eyes when he said the quote, what will your verse be? Neil's eyes opened up, my eyes opened up, and probably your eyes did too when you were watching it for the first time. And it's crazy how just a movie about a poet's society, just
about poetry, it's just a fucking, like if someone asks me
what is
the Dead Poets Society about, it's just a movie. about poetry.
But they barely do. There's like 10% poetry. That's the thing.
But doing something like the Dead Poets Society would be so cool though.
Like a group, actually meeting up and
like meeting up at night and like going to a fucking cave and smoking cigarettes and just reading poetry.
Nowadays would be
poetry would be what?
Smoking weed.
Whoa.
What is drugs?
Oh.
FBI, open up!
Fuck, man, let's get
So one of the things I also wanted to touch upon, we touched upon it briefly, but we talked about schools.
Yeah.
Schools, you go to school, right? Let's say you wanted to learn business. You go to school to learn business from a teacher who doesn't have a business on how to build and run a business. So to me, personally, that makes no sense. Because if you were successful enough in a business, you wouldn't be teaching at some school. You'd be writing a book about how to run a business.
Sometimes it's very rare that let's say business teacher actually has a successful business. Most of the time a teacher stays a teacher and a businessman stays a businessman. You know?
Yeah, because why would you, here's the thing, if you're a successful businessman, why would you spend so much time and energy reading through fucking papers, going through all that bullshit
to become a teacher after?
Not just to become a teacher, but why would you like make all this money, make millions of dollars, to then like be like, you know what, I'm gonna go to a school, to university, and get paid $100,000 a year to teach some dumb fucks how to run a business.
As a retiring businessman, that makes sense. That is possible, and I would see that happening.
No, I don't. I really don't, because the businessmen typically have.
It's true. They rarely retire, but
not only do they rarely retire, but they're too entrepreneurial to look at to look at a school and be like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna teach these kids how to be businessmen.
I think they're even gonna be frustrated to see that these kids are like, half of them aren't paying attention. Like, I'm giving you the secret, man. Listen, you know, most of them.
Well, no, they just talk about like macroeconomics or whatever, like shit you can learn online for free. But not just that. Like the conformity part is that it's a rigid top-down way of teaching you how to be an entrepreneur, and you can't teach top-down ways of being an entrepreneur.
There's many ways.
Because being an entrepreneur is not about conforming. It's literally about going your own way, right? So like if you're like learning how to be a doctor, that's different because you're going to work in a system. Exactly. If you're learning how to be a lawyer, that's different because you're working in a system. But if you're being an entrepreneur, there's not necessarily a system. The system is the government, but you're not like,
you have to play by its rules.
You have to play by the government's rules, right? Whatever country you make your business in, but you can't necessarily, you don't have like someone above you. You don't have a boss that tells you like, oh no, do it like this or do it like that.
You're completely right. There's in business or in filmmaking, for my case, like when someone's teaching me filmmaking, you can't tell me this is the way to do film and this is the beginning, the end of that. Tarantino will come there and say, fuck you, you know?
Tarantino will come in and say,
fuck you, bitch.
Exactly, you know? But it's the same thing in business and in other fields. But when you, like you said, there's a system in place, like for medicine, you can't do it 1,000 ways. There's one way or...
Well, yeah, because it's like you have to practice medicine within the country or whatever, and then you have or you have to go and you have to get the diploma and the degree or whatever the fuck. But for that stuff, I guess school is useful. But let's say if you're, in my opinion, you might disagree, and that's fine. In my opinion, if you go to school for like art, it's kind of pointless.
It is, because I agree with you, because
even though you went to school as like
I am still in this.
Oh, okay.
But I am in that, and I am stuck in film studies, and I have to be honest with you. Is it interesting? Did I learn stuff? Yes, it is, but it doesn't teach you how to make a film, because that's in film production, and they don't take everyone. Fucking Concordia. Still. But do I learn something? Do I learn about movies and why they were made? So it's not learning how to make a film. It's mostly learning why these films were made. It's a lot of socioeconomic contexts.
But wouldn't like, here's my problem with people who go to school for art.
Yeah, like other artists.
Just in art in general, which would encompass writing or film
Or
painting or whatever, is that the argument that I see a lot is that it puts a structure on you and it kind of forces you to become an artist. It kind of forces you to go out and do your work. The problem with that is that, like, if you're constrained by your ability to, if you're only able to make art because you have someone above you telling you should make art, then two things. Number one, does that mean that you don't have enough passion to do it yourself? And number two, once that authority is gone, what's going to continue? That's what's going to make you want to make more art in the future. You know what I mean? So art, I think, is dependent on three things: motivation, talent, and skill.
Mm-hmm.
So motivation, talent is something you don't. It's something you have or you don't have.
You build up.
You're built. No, it's not something you build up, but it's something you have or you don't. It's a talent, right? Just like how
you can make it better.
Yeah,
but
but that's skill. LeBron James isn't one of the best basketball players of all time because he's just skilled at being a basketball player, but because he is talented at basketball and he has certain things, like he's tall, and he's able to, like, dunk a ball properly, and so that's how he's able to become like one of the best players of all time. Like he has the agility and all that shit, but he also has the skill, which is something else. It's something you build up. If you don't necessarily have the talent, you can then build the skill,
the talent of understanding the game in his case.
Yeah. So what talent is a boost to skill.
Yes,
it's not skill itself. It's just a boost to it, right? So it's a multiplier.
It's like a lubricant.
Yes, exactly. But here's the thing: no matter how much talent, no matter how much skill you have, if you have no motivation, it's pretty much game over. Like, if you have no motivation to actually make art, if you don't want to make art just for the sake of it, like, like if you're a drawer, like, or a painter, it's like, I just thought of this painting, let me make it. Just go make it.
Most people that start art school, they expect to be taught the techniques, but what happens is they usually get caught up in the history.
Okay, so you went to art school, right?
Let's call it.
Well, you went to like an art program.
Yeah.
So what does it consist of?
That's the thing. Film studies, it's called in this case, and it's literally, as the name says, it's you study films and why they were made and how. Like, if you went in film production, you would have learned behind the camera. You're actually behind the camera. You're with the sound boom. You're editing. You're actually hands-on. But let's say you take an art class to become a painter. I guess, I don't know any, but I'm sure when they go in, they're going to have one of their courses being painting histories and all the styles and how this and what time periods it were from and what are the other movements that it inspired. They want to shove the history in your face. So that kind of demotivates the artists, the potential artists. And then when it's time to actually create,
they don't feel like creating anymore.
They're lost because they're so influenced by the past and all the history that they've been shoved into. Like, I know we shouldn't disregard historical art and, like, we should learn from it, but like when you just show that in a how can I say it, a potent artist that's ready to burst and do something great, you're just dimming them down.
Wouldn't you say that kind of negates their own original work as well?
You lose your originality at a certain point. Like, as a potentially future filmmaker, if I watch too many films, yes, it's good for my imagination, but at the same time, I lose my sense of being original. Something is going to come from somewhere in my movie. And for me, I hate that because I love being fully original. So it is going to...
I mean, like, I think you don't have to be fully original all the time. You can definitely take inspirations. What I look at it as original would just be taking elements from different things that have nothing to do with each other
and put them in an originally way. Like,
well, not just that, but like kind of doing a fusion dance together and then like turning it into something new and different.
And that's the thing. The beauty in art is that they're like, you gotta stick out of the they say in French, stand out. Oh, I don't know how to say it. You gotta be unconformist. It comes back to conformity. If you do a nice little classical painting, well, they're gonna easily categorize it as, okay, this is a modern classical painting. But if you go crazy in your art and you start doing something completely new, completely different and out of the norms, they'll have a hard time like situating it and trying to criticize it in a way, when in the end you don't even need the art wasn't made to be criticized. It was just made to be made because it was an expression, it's a feeling, it's a language. Art is a language.
So you're saying art is like an expressive language?
It is.
Okay.
It is, and they say that a lot in art department. It is a language upon which you rely yourself to speak things that words cannot say.
Like how Neil was acting.
Like Neil acting was his way of letting out the passionate side of whatever he has in his head. I don't know what, like Neil was a great character, but I don't know him well, you know, but there was something about acting that made him live, you know.
Well, he said that he always wanted to try it, but his father wouldn't let him.
Exactly.
So that indicates that he always wanted to act, but then like Keating was the catalyst to make him actually pull the trigger. Carpe Diem.
Exactly.
So,
well, which trigger are we talking about? Which trigger are we talking about? I'm lost. The trigger to actually try filmmaking? No, I don't think.
Wrong.
Yeah, wrong.
so I think if we go back to school, I think another way school is very conformist or causes conformity in children or in children and in adults and whatever. You look at the way the school structure is made. You're taught this class at this time, this thing at this time, this thing at this time,
and this way,
in the way the teacher wants it to be. And you're never allowed to really think outside the box. You're never allowed to get the conclusions that you want to necessarily.
And if you do get them, it will cost your grade because the teacher will.
Yeah, like like the teacher can hate on your work if it's not like the conformist way of looking at it.
They have no filter, man. These teachers, they will say your paper is trash. Like I have seen that, but yeah, continue.
The conformist thing is like they teach you in this way, and then you're basically forced to go out, find a job, basically work for someone else for the rest of your life until you're 65, and then you retire, and then you eventually end up dying. You end up being food for worms, like how Keating said. So I think if you really want to carpe diem, then you have to be able to break free of the chains. You have to break free of the blanket in a way. You have to throw that blanket aside and feel the cold air.
The cold reality.
The cold air, right?
Yeah. And speaking of
Yoga, fire.
teachers and schools, it's not only the content that they're showing that is conformist, because again, a teacher has a selection process. There's things that he wants to teach, and there's things he's told not to teach. And when we're talking about he's told or she's told, it's usually the program, and the program is linked to the head directors and then the dean and etc. It goes up, you know. So there are things that they're told not to teach, and that sometimes affect the way the teachers actually teach, you know. Like what was I gonna say? I was going to talk about a scene in the movie, you know, when the teachers are talking to each other during their
the dinner, yeah,
during their dinner sequence, and he says he looks at Keating. I forgot what was his name, but he wasn't a bad teacher. He was just curious, you know.
Agricola. Oh
yeah, he's the Latin teacher. Yeah.
Agricolae.
Exactly. So when he looked at Keating, he said, "You have quite a particular and unique way of teaching," which was ripping off the pages of the book of poetry.
Excrement.
He says that is quite unique, and I have never seen that. And the point I was trying to make is that teachers kind of forget that their students have dreams, and they have a hard time touching not physically, but like their words have a hard time piercing the hearts of these students. Except for Keating.
I noticed this in the movie, is that everyone else in the school, they're teachers, but Keating is the only one who's a mentor to these kids.
He's an idol. Honestly, he's more than a mentor. He's just.
But what's the difference between a teacher and a mentor in your eyes?
A teacher, I don't want to say is more robotic, but it's like a tutorial. A teacher is in the basic. I don't want to be mean to teachers, but like, because I am one. I am a karate instructor part time, and I know what it's like to teach. But you know, you better do your punch well. You know, what I'm trying to say is, you know, there's teachers who read out the textbook, who read out the syllabus, and this is how you're gonna do it by this way and that way, and no. That's like really a tutorial. You can open God of War and it'll teach you how to
throw the axe.
Exactly. And then there's a mentor or an idol or someone, a motivator, supposedly like Andrew Tate, you know, who wants to motivate the young, whatever, fuck him. But what I'm trying to say is, there are those who will pierce your heart with their words and their ideas, and they don't need to know you personally, but their words will carry a weight. All you need to do is to have an open ear at this point.
Yeah.
Like if you're like fucking sleeping in class, well, that's your problem. He said something really inspiring and something that moved all the 49 other kids, but you're the one who was asleep, so that's not his fault. But that's the thing with the mentor. The mentor is going to...
The mentors?
The mentors will suck the life out of you, but a mentor will give you reason to live your life to the fullest.
Well, a mentor is like you said, an idol. A teacher is like someone who just tells you how to do things. But a mentor is someone you can look up to, is someone who can inspire you to be better, inspire you to be, more like a superior version of yourself. And I think that a lot of kids lack that mentorship from their teachers.
And also, like, a mentor will also understand where his students are coming from in a way, without even knowing them, but just trying to imagine where the shoes your students are in.
A mentor truly wants the best out of his students.
Exactly.
So that's why he always pushes. A mentor always pushes his students or her students to the absolute furthest that they can possibly.
And that's why you're right when you said Keating is a mentor. When Todd actually finished his first poem, and he was literally like scraping his t-shirt off. That's how emotional Keating got. And then he went up to him and said, "Don't you forget that. You said something powerful." And the other student, the one that said the verse of the cat sleeping on the mat, and he said to him, he actually cared. He could have said, "Well, yours was shit. Next." He didn't. He went up to him. He said, "Look, it can be original, like you said, but be original. You know,
don't be ordinary.
Don't be ordinary." So he cared. He went beyond the correction. You know, he gave advice, because this is actually good from my karate teacher. He says, positive, constructive, positive. You give some positive, you give some constructive feedback, and then you end up with positive. And I think that's a mentor. A teacher is just correction. So what I wanted to add, one of my final points, it's how elders project their objectives and their mentality onto the youth, and that in a way also.
What do you mean by that?
And that is an extension of the conformity, because, like we said, conformity is the continuation of a pattern or a mentality, and that conformity doesn't just start like that. It comes from somewhere, and that somewhere is the elder. And in this movie, it is more than present. We see how the elders, like the four, what was the four you said? The four?
Tradition, honor, discipline, excellence.
Exactly. They preach those to the students, and the students, those who weren't open-minded and who do not critique and question, will probably do the same to their children. And it will be just a cycle of repeating and repeating. So there's not much more to be said about this. It's just saying that the elders do play a big role in propagating conformity, or projecting it into the future.
Interesting. Also, yeah, you're right. Also, one of the things I wrote was like one of the quotes. I guess this will be the final one, which was, "Just when you think you know something, try to look at it in a different way."
Of course.
So, for example, for karate, I'm sure there were moments where you thought like, "Oh, I know karate. I'm very good at it," or whatever. And then there was a moment where you got humbled by a teacher, and he taught you something you didn't know, and then you realized like how little you really knew about.
As a student, I got humbled so many times, physically and psychologically, because I thought I knew it all. You know, when we're young, we have that invincible mentality that we know it all, we're the best, we can do it all. And it's with age that you truly understand. And when we're talking about age, there's a certain fine line. There's those golden age, those certain years, those golden years, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Those golden years where you actually develop and learn. And it's not before 14. I guess 14 is, you're pretty old enough to start understanding life, but after that a bit, that's when you truly
like you realize it.
You realize how little I know. And it did happen, yeah, in, you know, worlds of martial arts. Most of the time you physically get humbled, you get one to the face, you know. But exactly, you get yourself into position. But it's
That's a lot of.
it is a lot of damage indeed. But it's not only that. There's a certain extension to what you just said. It's not only learning to know that I don't know it all, but it's coming to accept it. And how do you change your attitude to after that? Because some people, let's say we're having an argument and I totally destroy you, and because I'm right, because your argument was just way out there. Yeah, exactly. That's this perfect sound for it. But now, you as the one who just lost the argument, how will you react to that? Will you learn? Will you grow? Or will you just fuck off?
Like that's the thing. You're just going to end up very bitter. I'm just going to end up very bitter, very angry towards you, and I'm just not going to think that you're right in any way. I'm going to think that you're wrong, because it's like an ego thing.
And that's with the age too. Depends on your age. Well, of course, of your personality, but your age does play a huge factor with that.
What do you mean by that?
Because when you're young, you're ballsy, and you like to challenge authority, and you're like, no, but I still believe that smoking pot should be, you know, like whatever the argument. But when you become older, you kind of, yes, you're stuck in your old mentality, but at the same time, when someone breaks down a barrier of certain idea, you eventually start accepting it. And you can grow from it, and you put it to bed. You know, okay, this issue is over, it's done with, and I evolve. But it depends on your level of maturity. It's not everyone that can do that. If you're a viewer and you've been watching for the past, I don't know how many hours or whatever, I hope you took something out of this discussion, because everyone can have nice discussions and it ends well, but the people listening to it can actually learn something from it. And I hope you just don't swipe next. Actually do something with the information.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, like this show could easily just be us sitting down saying, oh, I like Dead Poet Society. Oh, I like that.
It was a fucking slapping movie.
Yeah, like you could sit down and be like, oh, it was a great movie. Oh, I like this part. I like that part. I think it's more interesting if we can sit down and actually have a discussion as to what the movie's trying to say and extrapolate as to what that topic is.
What are the lessons?
And what the lessons it can be taught, like what lessons can be taught by watching the movie, rather than, I like the movie. Oh, yeah, the movie's good.
Oh, by the way, did you watch it?
Did you guys watch the newest
Marvel
movie? Oh, let me
not dissing Marvel. They're good movies sometimes, but ask yourself.
No, they're garbage, trash.
Okay, what he said, yeah, can be true, but ask yourself, what are the things that are that you learn from this movie? Like, did you learn something from a Marvel movie? If yeah, good for you. If not, and it's been 5 Marvel movies you're watching and you didn't learn shit, maybe try.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't watch She-Hulk.
Unless you want to see a Hulk twerk.
Soda!
So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for all notifications, because the subscribe button doesn't do what it used to do. And next week, the show should be pretty cool as well. It's going to be very insightful. But on that note...
Oh, Captain, my Captain!